Good evening, Niner faithful. Welcome to another episode of Between Two Beards. I'm Rob Schuh. That's your co-host, Randon McMahon. We are very excited to be here, as very clearly you are as well. Not only do we have our regular trove of people in there saying what's up prior to the show in the comment section, but we had Chris Royal, sneakerhead here on the channel, coming in with the super chat about the restaurant recommendation that was given for the fish and chip spot out in Astoria, Oregon. Came in with the super chat prior to the show. Always got to give that shout out to the super chat prior to the show. What's up, faithful? Rob, bow picker was good. I think Moe's halibut is a better fish, but that batter on their tuna was on point. Definitely a good spot. First and foremost, had to put that up in there, but I didn't even give my co-host, Randon McMahon, a chance to say hello yet, because that's how important this was. Randon, I mean, is it something else to get the super chat being like, hey, thank you for the recommendation. It wasn't quite as good as this other spot that I know of, but I wanted to show my appreciation and say what's up.
It's like a backhanded compliment. It's like, oh, man, your hair looks good for it being greasy. You're like, what?
No, I love it, Chris. I absolutely love it. Great comment. Appreciate the fact that you had the chance to try it out. And I got to give it to Moe's. I mean, it's a dope spot. Their clam chowder is on point. Also have to bring it in for CJ Gray. Big shout out. CJ Gray just won the Super Bowl on Madden with Lance. I mean, that's big news, right? That is big time for the 49ers. Probably a precursor of what's about to happen this season.
A bunch of crystal ballers out there, doing the voodoo there.
A little seance going on.
Yeah.
I love it. Randall Riley, sneakerhead here on the channel, already congratulating CJ on the Super Bowl victory. Most important question, CJ, is, what are you going to do next? Are you going to Disney World? That is what's on everyone's mind. Randon, this is going to be a show primarily focused on everyone's favorite media outlet when it comes to football. And that's Pro Football Focus. I mean, never a source of, of debates, never putting out random, half thought out football takes, always well thought out, always on point, with a rich dose of sarcasm from your host there. Are you excited to go through these PFF rankings that are all fairly recent here?
I'm excited about it. And I think PFF gets kind of a bad rap because a lot of people just look at the list and don't ever read the article. And they're like, oh, this guy's a jackaloon. And like, you're like, okay, well, like you didn't even read what it said, like it just said, but that's, if you look at like one of them we're going to talk about, the best play callers, they just released the list with no context.
Right.
And people were like, Kellen Moore, number 2, you're like, but it just, like, you don't read the article, but all the retweets and the clicks on just the list was way more with the list with the link for the article so you could read it. Like, people just like chaos. And in the Twitter world, that's where it's at, We just want to have opposing sides and yell at each other, Randon. We don't want nuance. We don't want to get all the details. We don't need the filler information. Just give us the high level take, and then I can disagree with it and yell at you. That's the way we are as a country right now. Yeah, and I mean, I like, Twitter's an interesting place. I saw already a Trey Lance hater club being formed on there. Like, you're wishing for a kid to be like failing already.
Unbelievable.
Like the Twitter world it can be a deep dark hole if you don't know who to stop you from going down that. But I mean, I like PFF. I'm more of an analytics guy and myself, so I like reading the articles and why certain stuff, for the teams and really get it going. And I think one of the best ones they wrote, I believe it was last year, was defensive line versus coverage, which is more important, which is more volatile to a team and all that kind of stuff like that. That's a good, article that I really like. And it just kind of gives you a different nuance to football than just your own opinion. And
I like what I like about the information that they put out is they are often based upon statistics. They have something behind the conclusion that they've drawn, but more importantly, it gives you something to discuss. It gives you subject matter material to talk about and debate, which quite obviously, if you go look at Twitter, if you go look at any of these social media platforms where people like to talk about football, People love to debate. And so you can criticize the takes that they have all the time, but they are there to be had, that their reasoning is laid out, even if you don't agree with it. And they continue to put out that content that gives us something to get upset about. So I can't be mad at that.
Now things that everybody has all these like different stats and all this kind of stuff. I mean, baseball is a treasure trove of just weird stats. And when it comes to football, it's like a lot of these articles are, hey, the guy who's writing the article comes up with like this formula to evaluate a position. Okay, well, if you don't agree with his formula, then you're probably not going to agree with his list. But
Right.
at least read the article to like, okay, I can see where he's going there, and that's how he became of it. And I can take little bits and pieces that I really like about what he said. But yeah, they just throw out these lists right away, and then it's just anarchy. It's like, throwing a slab of meat into a Tyrannosaurus den. It's just it's just pure chaos.
Yes, absolutely. I do like Randall Riley's comment here talking about the fact that Trey Lance has made it. You've made it when you have a hater club. Absolutely. I feel like I have my own little hater club going on. Maybe that's a sign that I've made it. M. Ramalho, sneakerhead here on the channel, says all statistics should be taken with a grain of salt. Depending on the numbers or criteria, you can make them bend to your whim. I disagree slightly with that, but I also agree half-heartedly with it in that you can find a statistic to back up almost any assertion that you have, right? If you cherry pick statistics, then you can collate your own argument based on those statistics. But if you take a broader view, I also believe, while I believe that's true, the reason I say I disagree with it a little bit is that I believe stats don't lie, that you can bend statistics to tell a different story, but the stats themselves, the numbers do not lie.
No, the numbers don't. And like I said, the people just take one statistic and like, oh, like this is why Jimmy Garoppolo is a top 10 quarterback. And you're like, okay, what about all the other 19 statistics? And you're like, it's like, it's just those kind of things, but it makes you think of, the game in such a different way, right? Because you view the game generally with beers in tow, and then you go back and look at the data, and we're going to talk about it on some of these topics, that Elijah Mitchell wasn't as good as a lot of people thought he was, as far as, he doesn't have that breakaway. His longest run of the year was 39 yards. And we've had that on the outside zone with Maserati. Like, he's a home run every single time. And so it's just like looking at those statistics on maybe how you thought a season went or a player did versus what it is. Fantasy football is huge with this. Like a person could have 3 or 4 good weeks and rank inside the top 15 to 20 wide receivers, but statistically they weren't very consistent all year long. So it's just an interesting thing to debate, and I like it because it just adds a different element to an opinion.
It does, and it elicits strong opinions. I love CJ Gray illustrating that for us about the offensive play caller list that most people have seen, coming in to say Kellen Moore, number 2, is a joke. CJ going on to say defense has made adjustments on Moore. He's a fraud, along with Kingsbury. I definitely agree on the Kingsbury front. We will get to that topic in just a moment, CJ, but I love the passion that is already coming through. What say you, Randon? Should we dive right into these lists?
Huzzah, let's do it.
Huzzah, indeed. Let's kick this thing off with one that needs a little bit of explanation, right? So we don't have the graphic in front of us, so I'm going to do my best to illustrate what it is PFF was talking about. This is in regard to basically vanilla defensive schemes, whether you are a unique defensive scheme or not a unique defensive scheme. So it was a graph in which the center of the graph was 0, 0. And that equated to, on the vertical line, that was the man coverage rate. And so 30% equated to 0. If you ran man coverage greater than 30%, you would be north of that line. And if you ran it less than 30%, you would be below that line. The other line there, the horizontal line, represented the blitz rate. So again, it was 0 equated to 30. So it was 30% and 30% equals 0, 0. If you were blitzing more than 30% of the time and in man coverage more than 30% of the time, you would be in the upper right-hand quadrant of the graph. And that would illustrate that you were a defense that gave unique looks and did things that were unexpected. Whereas if you blitzed less and did less man coverage, you were more of a not a unique defense. The 49ers were one of the 5 closest teams to 0-0. The other ones in there were the Cardinals, Panthers, Steelers, and Titans. Randon, what was your overall take on this comparison in looking at defenses in this way?
Yeah, I think there's couple ways to look at it, especially with the other teams that are there. You look at the Steelers, for example, have a top corner, and they have arguably the best edge rusher. They've led the league in sacks, and so you're saying, okay, we have an elite personnel that can get the job done. We don't need to have all these expensive looks. We can just rely on our players' talent, and I think with how that relates to the Niners is you look at like, okay, well, what did we do best? And that's rush the passer. And we had a hodgepodge of corners out there, but we had a good safety tandem that didn't allow a lot of elite plays downfield. And so we kept everything in front of us. And I think the fact that we didn't run a lot of man, we're right around average, didn't give D'Amico Ryans a lot of chances to leave people out on islands like he could this year with Travarius Ward and Emmanuel Mosley being the top 2 corners.
Yeah, you just didn't have the personnel out there to really run a significant amount of man coverage. The 49ers, as you stated, were working with depleted cornerbacks in that room and could rely upon both of those safeties, keeping everything in front of them, a defensive line that could get after it, and therefore playing very little man coverage and also blitzing less. But we did hear talk of an increase in blitzing. So with D'Amico Ryans coming in, there was at least the hint that, Fred Warner is going to get more of those chances. And then it didn't matriculate. We didn't actually see it happening out there on the field. It does seem that this year could be that shift in bringing in Charvarius Ward, who is adept at playing man coverage. When you have that one player that can be in man significant amounts, you now have freed up a player that would otherwise be in zone somewhere or in double coverage and can now come and rush after the passer. Would you expect to see an uptick in blitzes this year to coincide with an increase in man coverages for the 49ers?
Yeah, you saw it towards the end of the season with Ambry Thomas as they started doing more man coverage on third downs and in a lot of pressure situations. And now you could see them move that even further to add more interesting looks. And some looks are also stunts, right? When you have Armstead moving permanently inside, you have this rotation of edge rushers on the other side and trying to free up Bosa from his double coverages. I think he was one of the top, if not the top guy to be doubled last year. And so running more stunts because you can rely on the corners to cover longer is going to allow for more unique looks to come from D'Amico Ryans and the team. And then you also could have more linebacker blitzes, right? They had one guy at PFF said that I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but the linebacker for the Cowboys is the best linebacker in the league already. And they put him in a lot of unique situations because the fact that he's able to blitz, he's able to be in coverage. And I think they relied so much on Fred Warner to be a coverage guy and Al-Shaair to come in because of injuries that they didn't allow them to have unique looks to blitz the quarterback very often. And I'm excited to see how that changes this season.
Yeah, absolutely. On the Cowboys, were they talking about Vander Esch or the young
Parsons,
rookie and Micah Parsons? Yeah. Nice. To me, that list is not necessarily talking about, while we are talking about vanilla schemes, we're not talking about bad defenses, right? I mean, you look at the other names on that list, even the 2 that don't excite you, the Cardinals and the Panthers. Cardinals, I would say, are a fundamentally sound defense, as are the Panthers. I wouldn't list the Panthers' issues as being primarily defensive. I would put them as primarily offensive. And then obviously the Steelers and the Titans being 2 defenses that perennially are elite defenses within the league. And so it doesn't necessarily correlate to a weak defense, just one that you know what they're going to do. I would like to see a little more creativity from D'Amico Ryans. It now feels like he has the manpower to do that, and it will be exciting to watch it evolve. I also found it fascinating on that list where they had a whole group of teams that they lumped together as sort of the Fangio effect And they were all definitely further away from that vanilla 0-0 ranking. So you can see in the future, whether we get it this year or not, with the hopeful return of Vic Fangio, whenever D'Amico Ryans is hired away as a head coach, you will see some creativity coming back to the Niners there as well.
Yeah, they mentioned like the Rams as one of the interesting teams is because they run a lot of less man fronts. And they do a lot of schemes because they have a record. Aaron Donald that can take up one or two blockers on the offensive line, dropping more people in coverage. And because they spend so much money on these top guys, they have replacement level players everywhere else. And so you got to scheme away from your weaknesses. And that's why the Niners were able to beat the crap out of them in the run game, is because their scheme didn't match up with our scheme. Yeah. What changed in the NFC Championship? Well, they went away from the norm of their defense and stacked the line against us. And so being able to have versatility, which I think the Niners will have this season, being able to do press man, being able to drop in zone, to rush forward, to blitz, I think it'll allow the Niners to be one standard deviant away from the center and allow us a little bit more. We don't need to go so far away to where we are the Rams of the world, but I think that you can still rely on the athlete themselves, right? Nick Bosa is a top defensive end. You have Armstead, one of the top D tackles. You have Warner and Charvarius Ward and Mosley, who are all in their own right and one of the best safeties in the NFL. Like, you have a lot of premium athletes that you don't have to go super crazy, but it'll allow you to, because the fact that you can now trust somebody at every single level of the defense.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that on the offensive side, we seem to scheme around deficiencies significantly. Kyle Shanahan constantly working around any bumps and bruises along the offensive line in prior seasons, but along the defense, you haven't seen as much in getting away from the scheme. And you know, I mean, potentially that just has to do with the creativity in Kyle Shanahan being on the offensive side of the ball. I will enjoy watching the evolution of that defense this year, because it does certainly come closer to emulating what you're talking about with the Rams in the ability to eat up double teams. Aaron Darnold, although it's a different position, certainly Nick Bosa faces his fair share of double teams and can eat them up. Charvarius Ward, I'm not going to put him in the same category as Patrick Ramsey until I see him do Patrick Ramsey things.
Jalen
Ramsey. Why did I get Patrick Ramsey? Where did that come from?
But Broncos are on the list too, and Patrick Surtain is one of the best corners too. So I mean, maybe you were mixing up two defenses there.
I'm looking at the quarterback, Patrick Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey is who I was definitely thinking of. Yeah, it's obviously not going to be the same level of man coverage from Charvarius Ward as Jalen Ramsey. But if you can get some level of that man coverage, it's going to be more than what the 49ers were doing in 2021.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Like I said, one standard deviation away. We don't need to go crazy. We just need to add some more stuff. And I think D'Amico Ryans in his press conference said that, he was a rookie too. Like, calling plays, he said, was natural for him because he did it while he was on the field. And he would always train himself. Hey, what would I call in this situation if I was the head coach while he was playing? But the evolution of his defense is going to probably be the same as Saleh. If you look at Saleh in his first year, ran primarily cover 3, and we started seeing different variations as the seasons went on. I think as he got more adept at calling plays, and D'Amico Ryans should be no different.
I would agree. And in answer to Darren Worthington, wasn't Fangio at one of those practices? Yes, he was, lurking in the background. Will most likely be that guy tapped for that defensive coordinator. That's what I see. Yes, Russell James also coming in. Fangio did come to an organized team activity. I think you are correct about that. All right, let's transition this into another PFF ranking they had here. 10 best year 3 breakout candidates ranked by PFF. Now, there are 10 of them. Our guy ranked number 6 here, so I'm not worried about 7 through 10. So we're just going to worry about 1 through 6. Who got ahead of our man, Brandon Ayuk? Little spoiler there. All right, so here's the ranking. Jerry Jeudy, number 1 on that list. Got to be the Russell Wilson effect. Number 2, Jonathan Greenard, the Texans edge rusher. Number 3, Kyle Duggar, the Patriots safety. Jonah Jackson at 4, the Lions guard. And Travis Gibson, the Bears edge rusher. Again, seems to be an opportunity to step up there with Khalil Mack. I'm having trouble with first names today, Randy. I got to just stick to the last names. With Mack gone, Gibson has a chance to step up. Brandon Ayuk coming in at 6th here, and this is what they had to say about it. Ayuk was everyone's favorite breakout candidate in 2021, so much so that he was going ahead of teammate Deebo Samuel in fantasy drafts. While that looks absurd in retrospect, the production difference was more a function of usage and not necessarily indicative of talent. Ayuk was a separation machine last season, despite only finishing with 816 yards. He hauled in over 50% of his contested opportunities and broke 18 tackles on 56 catches. If Samuel is out any length of time over his contract dispute, Ayuk should have no problem whatsoever filling that role in the offense. How dare you, PFF, put that bad juju on us at the end there if Deebo holds out? Deebo's not holding out. We are getting that contract done, but I still expect Brandon Ayuk to have a breakout season here. How do you feel about that list and Brandon Ayuk being 6th behind those 5 other players?
Judy makes sense the most, obviously, with Russell Wilson there. I mean, their quarterback play has been garbage. He's one of the best route runners as far as in that class. So it makes sense. Like, I did minor research on the other guys. You know, you look at the pass rush from the Bears. The Bears, ironically, with how garbage they were, had a very good pass rush. They lost 2 guys in that ingredient. So they're hoping that this guy, with getting more snaps, could increase. The Lions offensive line is if in the line and the offensive line rankings is pretty good. And so to see that jump when they've invested in that position, and that's why you're seeing DeAndre Swift or D Swift go in, late first round in some fantasy drafts because of how good that the offensive line is. So I don't really see any disagreement there because, you're looking at a guard can change the run game, especially for a team with a mediocre offense. And they were talking about the best jump, the best breakout for them. And I know that this is more of an opinion list than a statistic list. But I agree. I mean, as far as our guy Ayuk, is he going to supersede Samuel? I mean, where are the targets going to go? Is Trey Lance going to target Kittle a lot more than Jimmy Garoppolo? Is the offensive play going to be there all year if he's not in the doghouse? Like, what are the differences going to be? And so it's interesting. I still think that he has a chance to. I liked the biggest stat that I liked in this is the contested catches. 50% is quite a bit, and he's the only one really on our roster that has that radius, that huge radius. And I really like that stat being brought up because Trey Lance is not as accurate as Jimmy Garoppolo in the middle areas, and being able to still go up and make contested catches could prove useful for him.
Yeah, the catch radius is huge for Brandon Ayuk and definitely something worth calling out here. I'm going to bring in Lee Ving's comment here because I think it speaks to, at the end of the year, looking back, right? PFF can use their own metrics to prove themselves right. Wide receivers at least have tangible stats. So I'm sort of agreeing with Lee Ving here, but also just using it to state that, yes, at the end of the year, when we look at the improvement from 2021 to 2022, it will be very easy to say, well, how much did Jerry Jeudy or Brandon Ayuk improve? You could even take it as a percentage increase in receiving yards or percentage increase in touchdown receptions. You'll have tangible stats to really try and hang your argument upon. With certainly with an offensive lineman, you would have to go to most likely PFF's own metrics that they will get to decide on that have a lot of opinions in them, right? Where it's a catch or it's not a catch. It's black or white in that. It becomes more of how long were they able to successfully block on a particular play. And so those things become just a little bit less concrete. I do believe that.
But the data set is a lot bigger.
The data set is much bigger. They're taking into account
every single play
categories. Yes, right. And they're taking into account every snap. What I will say about the placement on this list for Brandon Ayuk is I actually don't have as big of a problem with it as I initially thought I would when looking at Brandon Ayuk as 6th on that list. Part of that comes from the fact that Brandon Ayuk did have 816 receiving yards last season. It's fair to assume that even if he breaks 1,000 yards receiving, as I have predicted that he will, it may not be by a whole heck of a lot. And so if he ends up with 1,050 yards and it's approximately a 20% increase, will that be the same as someone who was in a reserve role last year, now climbs into a starting role like Travis Gibson with the Bears and can potentially rack up double-digit sacks in that role. So again, when I actually go through and look at this, it's not as egregious as it initially seems to me. If I'm directly comparing the two wide receivers on the list, I do have to acknowledge that right away out of the gate, I would expect more from the Russell Wilson effect for Jerry Jeudy than I would for the Trey Lance effect for Brandon Ayuk. I expect that long-term to be a very beneficial pairing for Brandon Ayuk. I'm just not sure out of the gate it's going to be gangbusters.
I mean, the Niners already have a legit number one receiver, and they have a top tight end. So, he's coming in third where Jerry Jeudy could easily take the number one spot right away. They don't have an elite tight end there. And so you're really only facing off against Cortland Sutton. So, I mean, at that point, it's wide open where I think the Niners kind of already have a set hierarchy of where it's at. Where would you be? Now, breakout's a pretty drastic word. You said 20% increase. Is that enough for you to be a breakout, or would it have to be something ridiculous like 1,400 yards and like 10 touchdowns? Like, is it a true breakout, or you just think like anything over 20-25% production increase would be considered a breakout in your eyes?
It's a great question and a hard one to answer, because I think there are certain metrics that if you hit would qualify as a breakout season. And even though it is only a 20% increase, I do believe if Brandon Ayuk becomes 1,000-yard receiver, that will be viewed as a breakout season. And yet, to go back to the original question that you're asking there, is a 20% increase actually breaking out? And if I'm just looking at it statistically, I would say no. I mean, if you have something where he just ends up increasing the yardage, but the receptions don't go up significantly, that probably wouldn't be a breakout season in my mind. However, if you can get above 1,000 receiving yards and maybe crack into double-digit touchdowns, doubling his touchdown production, that would certainly qualify in my book.
Yeah, I think you either have to have a modest production and increase in both. Like if he ends up with 75 receptions for 1,000 and like 8 touchdowns, I think that would be considered a breakout year. But if he goes still 800 yards, but he has 12 touchdowns and he's more of a red zone threat, I mean, you could make the case again for a breakout. I think breakout usually means like just rushed onto the scene like a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson. So to be a true breakout, like from a national media standpoint, I think he'd have to hit 1,400 in double-digit touchdowns, which would be a tall ask for Trey Lance to throw for that many yards, to be honest.
Very tall ask when you're spreading the ball around. And I agree with Russell James here, who's saying Lance will spread it around, methinks. And I love the use of methinks.
All right,
well played, sir. I do agree with Randall Riley as well that chemistry may matter here with Brandon Ayuk. Certainly, they are putting in the work in the preseason, in the offseason. Strider 3006. Rob, BA could have a breakout year due to added emphasis on Debo this year by defenses, akin to Owens game-breaking catch record in Rice's last season. Breaking the game catch record. I guess that is correct in the way it is phrased there. My apologies for reading it incorrectly there, Strider. But yes, if you have double coverage on Debo for the vast majority of the game, it will open it up for Brandon Ayuk. I tend to agree, though, that like if you're just looking at statistics from one season to the next, you want a little bit of a bigger jump to actually say it was a breakout year. You could have different factors going into that, whether it's the second half of the season he's on fire, whether it's an increase in touchdowns, whether it's an increase in receptions. I think there are numbers that if he hits, it becomes impressive. If he gets close to 100 receptions, if he gets close to 10 touchdowns, those numbers are staggering, even if the others don't increase at the rate that you'd like to see.
I would think so. And Zachary Couch, I think, is hitting our next topic.
Zachary Couch taking us into the running back group. Here we go. Talking about the running back.
I thought we were going to the wide receiver team ranking.
Ooh, yes. We probably should go to the wide receiver team ranking.
You're the head guy here. I'm along for the ride.
You would think that we went wide receiver. We do have wide receiver groups. All right, let's do that. Let's go to the wide receiver group rankings, and then we'll do the individual wide receiver rankings. Then we'll come back around to the running back rankings. Let's go that route. All right, so here we are with the group rankings where they did have the 49ers in the top tier, tier 1 being elite. However, they were at the tail end of those rankings, and that left them 6th. So you had the Bengals, number 1, the Bucks, number 2, Miami, number 3, Philadelphia, number 4, the Raiders, number 5, San Francisco, number 6. And they do acknowledge it's one of the more well-rounded wide receiver groups in the NFL. What do you make of the 49ers behind those 5 other teams and being in the elite category?
Yeah, I mean, this is 2000 going into it. So, for me, I'm looking at the Bengals. It makes sense, right? They were the only group to have with Chase and Higgins and Boyd, and I get that completely. And then,
yes,
obviously Burrow with him going into that, it makes a lot of sense there. Tampa Bay, I guess they're saying Godwin's healthy at this point, but they added Russell Gage. They still have, they don't have OJ Howard and Brown, and Gronk just retired. So I don't know when this was written versus when, he just retired a couple days ago. But
yeah, they acknowledged those losses. So this is the first one I objected to, was the Bucks. It feels like you're hanging on past production. Chris Godwin coming back from injury, Mike Evans, yes, they are both good wide receivers, but adding Russell Gage to the mix and then the rest of the room, this was the one I had issues with. Please continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that Godwin is going to be injured for a lot of the season, and he was injured late last year. Mike Evans is a top 10 wide receiver. You could debate me at that all day. He's top 10 in the league for sure. So you have the powerhouse receiver at the top, but where's the depth in there? Like, you don't really have a tight end. You don't really have a 2 or 3 for most of the season. Like, where is this? It's like, if this all 100% healthy, like going to the playoffs, like you could make an argument with Chris Godwin. I could also see this being a spot where, maybe OBJ goes, towards the end of the year.
Right.
But as it stands right now, like, I don't see it. I think they're missing piece. I think they should be in the next tier, which is strong overall, but there's a weak point. I think they need to be a tier down. Miami Dolphins makes sense to me.
Yep.
Bringing in Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle set the rookie receiving receptions record. Gesicki is one of the top tight ends in the league. And then you have, Cedric Wilson did a good job for Dallas. And so, I really think that their group could be there. This ranking doesn't really take into consideration the quarterback, in my opinion, which is fine because it's the receiver room. But as far as pure talent, they have a very good receiving room. So I was not upset about Miami being up there.
No, nor I. The next one, though, I was a little upset again. There were 2 that I objected to, 2 that I felt should have been behind San Francisco that were instead in front of them. And it was Philadelphia. And it's because, again, of the top 2 pairing of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And I acknowledge that both of those are phenomenal wide receivers. I also want to see A.J. Brown's fit within Philadelphia before I, say that it's going to be a phenomenal situation for him going forward. And again, just looking at the top 2 and then Quez Watkins and the rest that fill in the room, I'm not quite as excited in how they round out the wide receivers. I see San Francisco's as being far more well-rounded, as they do acknowledge. And I'm not taking anything away from Philly. I just would have moved the Bucks and Philly down to 5 and 6 in this group. I could go with your route of taking the Bucks down into tier 2 as well. I didn't object to the Bengals, Miami, or the Raiders, obviously with the addition of Devontae Adams, but I definitely did object to Philly and the Bucks.
Yeah, Philly seems like, okay, like A.J. Brown I know is elite, but I mean, you could say so is Deebo Samuel, and I think Ayuk is better than Devontae Smith at this point in his career, and Kittle is a hell of a lot better than Goddard. So, like, where are we missing this? And I don't think even the later guys in the list don't compete with Juwan Jennings and the depth that we have on the team. We're splitting hairs from the 4 to 6, but that's the whole point of what we do here. And so, I think Philly is missing that extra. I think they need another piece to show up or develop. Like, they might already have it on their roster, but it hasn't developed yet. Like, I don't see Devontae Smith being a 1,000-yard receiver next season, where I could see that for Ayuk.
Yeah, most definitely. And the audience agrees as well. Leaving Philly, huh? Randall Riley, sneakerhead here on the channel. Philly should be below us. I tend to agree with that. And Russell James saying they're projecting based on Brady, probably regarding the Bucs. And this is supposed to be taking the quarterback out of it. That again is why I object to the Bucs coming in. It seems like residual effect from when they were an elite pass catching group, when you had Antonio Brown, OJ Howard, and Gronk. Now minus those pass catchers, I just struggle to see it. Also have to recognize Terror Dome coming in here as the newest member of the sneakerhead community. Look at that. I'm a member of the Schuh program, homie. Welcome, Terror Dome. Absolutely welcome to it. Yeah, that the only objection I had were those two. And the 49ers being in the elite category, the slander is not significant here. It's a little bit of slander, but it's not significant slander, so I'm going to let it slide.
Yeah, I think the Raiders is well warranted. I think it's underrated how good Hunter Renfrow is in that like Wes Welker role that he had, and you saw like how much Wes Welker changed the game for wide receivers there. I think that he's just very sneaky, and Devontae Adams is still arguably the best wide receiver in the league.
Yes.
You have Darren Waller, who was second in PFF's win above replacement for the 19 and 20 season before he got a major injury bug last season. And so I really think that they could be up there with top receiver rooms, and they could be pretty deadly in that division. But sixth is not bad. And like they say here, go ahead. You read why what they said about the Niners.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and let them know what it was that went into their rankings.
Yeah, this is number 6 ranking is under the assumption that the offseason rumors of Deebo Samuel end up being water under the bridge. Before Samuel took on his wide back role toward the tail end of the 21 season, he was the most efficient wide receiver in the league, or one of the most efficient wide receivers in the league. His 86.9 PFF grade through week 10 ranked third, only behind Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams. George Kittle remains one of the league's few truly elite tight ends, and Brandon Ayuk has emerged from Kyle Shanahan's doghouse down the stretch to generate a 119.4 passer rating on his 83 targets. With potential contributions from less established players like Juwan Jennings and rookie Danny Gray, this becomes one of the more well-rounded groups in the league on paper.
I love that breakdown. And I will say that, like I said, in that group ranking, I don't see too much slander going on. Maybe a tiny bit, but there is some slander, and I'm taking offense in this next list that we went over. It's not as bad as one that we'll hit in a little bit, but we're talking about individual wide receiver rankings. And you just read off the stat about Deebo Samuel and his efficiency, right? So you would assume that Deebo would be fairly high on this list. And he is. Maybe I'm using hyperbole here. Maybe people won't be as shocked at where he is on this list as I was. But here it is. In the elite tier of wide receivers. Again, this is individual wide receivers. Number 1, Devontae Adams. Number 2, Cooper Kupp. Number 3, DeAndre Hopkins. Number 4, Stephon Diggs. Number 5, Tyreek Hill. Number 6, Jamar Chase. Number 7, Justin Jefferson. And the last one in the elite tier, number 8, Mike Evans. That means in PFF's breakdown here, Deebo Samuel is not an elite wide receiver when it comes to the individual rankings. And I'm sorry, I cannot get on board with anyone who says Deebo Samuel is not freaking elite. So yes, he does headline tier 2, which they put as young talents on the cusp of tier 1. Deebo Samuel. I will put out there, along with what you just went through in talking about his efficiencies, you're looking at one of 4 wide receivers to earn an elite PFF grade above 90 in 2021. So he got the elite grade by their own grading system, but he doesn't qualify as elite. So do you take this as the level of slander that I do, where I'm visibly upset, Randon?
Not as much as you are, and I maybe see where they're going with it because his usage was different, right? His wide receiver usage, and if you're grading it just on pure wide receiver, like they said, through weeks 1 through 10, he was number 3. So, but I don't think usage should be determined in this stat. As a wide receiver, he was 3 when asked to do wide receiver things in weeks 1 through 10. So for me, I think it is a little bit of slander, and I said, okay. Then let's go and look at, okay, maybe they're like, okay, all the other receivers have done it for multiple years besides Jamar Chase. So if you're going to let Jamar Chase be elite after 1 year, then you should allow Deebo Samuel to be elite for 1 year. I think it's a little bit of kind of hyperbole there. I can see it. I'm a little bit of slander. They just moved that tier one person down, and you're good to go. And then DeAndre Hopkins might be elite in previous seasons, but he wasn't elite last season. I mean, he was injured most of the season and wasn't as dominant as he used to be. So, like, is it just overall in the career? Is it just for the last season going into the season? Is it a predictive list? I think the fact that Deebo is 9 is not like insulting, but I think he still should be considered elite in the league.
Yes, I think that is what I took the greatest amount of offense to, because when I look at the list of players ahead of him, I could make cases for Deebo deserving to be ahead of some of those players. I could also make the opposite case on those very same players as to why they might belong above Deebo Samuel. I think it is that disrespect of putting him down in the category of young talents on the cusp of tier 1, when, again, you had him ranked as an elite wide receiver in last season, where he had an amazing season as a wide receiver. He led the league with his 10.8 average on yards after the catch. He is elite. I could make the case for Deebo being closer to 6 or 7 on that list. That's not where the sticking point is for me. It's calling him frickin' tier 2. It's unacceptable. Terradome, all pro is all pro. Well said.
I think if you're looking at an all pro should be an elite player. And I think it just, a lot of people towards maybe recency bias, because the recency bias is him being a running back or a wide back.
Right.
And a lot of people forget, like, he was on pace. He was only behind Cooper Kupp in receiving yards through weeks 1 through 10. So it's like, if he doesn't get that usage change, like you're talking about him rivaling Kupp for the best wide receiver in football last season.
Right. It's just slander, and I'm not here for it, Randon. This is where I will take out my aggression against PFF. Let's transition before I get too upset to even talk anymore. We'll get into the running back rooms here. We'll talk about running back competition in camp. This one was interesting because it wasn't a ranking other than PFF specifically calling out Buffalo as the best competition in camp, with Devin Singletary against Zach Moss against James Cook, who comes out on top. But in the alternative section with 2 other teams in there, the 49ers were ranked with 4 guys in competition there: Mitchell, TDP, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Trey Sermon. To me, the fascinating takeaway from this is I agree wholeheartedly with PFF that this is a camp competition to keep your eyes on. It's also one that is going to spill over into the season. This, as I predicted yesterday on my show, I see this very much more as a 3-headed monster going into the season, similar to what we saw in 2019. And not the type of season where we had one breakaway back that had the vast majority of yards when looking at it, breaking it down in that way, like last season with Elijah Mitchell. So I'm going to be looking at this competition, not just in preseason, but going into the regular season as well. It's going to be a fascinating one to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, I kind of look at it this way, because Shanahan has had a different leading rusher every single season that he's coached.
Yes.
So, you're looking at a team here that has drafted a running back in the 3rd round 2 years in a row. You're looking at it. They went with Elijah Mitchell, even though he had like broken ribs, but he only played 10 games. And so you're looking at a person who, in Shanahan, if he finds a guy that he likes or dislikes, it could drastically determine who the leading rusher is in the season. You look at Sermon, was in the doghouse early, was not, suiting up for games, but he had good, yards per attempt for most of the games that he did play in. So I could definitely see this being Ty Davis Price. I could definitely see this being Sermon's year or Mitchell's year. If somebody gets in the doghouse early, I could see them force feeding one guy for 1,000 yards all year long, and the first person to get that inside track might have it. So, yeah, whoever plays well in camp and stays out of the doghouse could have that leading role week 1.
It is wild to think that it would be no stretch of the imagination to believe that either Mitchell or TDP could lead the team in both carries and rushing yards. But to your point, if something were to happen in camp where all of a sudden Davis Price is no longer the favorite and Sermon has some sort of emergence, I see either one of those guys being more of a bell cow type back, right? Replacing the Tevin Coleman type of role from 2019, where they get a higher volume in carries, but have a lower yards per carry average. I don't see Mitchell as being that guy because of the injury history, right? He was that guy last year, did not hold up as well underneath the bell cow burden of having so many carries. So I would think TDP and Sermon would be more likely to get a greater number of carries, but any of those three could lead in rushing yards, depending on how many longer runs that they have. Although you point out that Mitchell didn't have all that many long runs last year.
No, his longest run of the season was 39 yards. And so if we're going to go, like they're drafting all these bigger backs, if we're switching to power, like you could see it switch up quite a bit. And I think there were a lot of games last year where Mitchell suited up and was given 25 carries when he's gotten broken ribs and everything was taped together because Shanahan didn't trust anybody else. But if he does trust another running back like Ty Davis Price, who is a good pass blocker, like you could see the usage go up for these guys, and the competition cap's going to be great. I think it's going to come out. I mean, I think Mitchell is going to be the guy, the incumbent, but that doesn't really mean anything to anybody in Niner. And if you're a Niners fan, for a fact that it doesn't mean anything because, like I said, different leading rusher every single season that he's been there.
Yes, and it's fair to assume it will be a different leading rusher this season as well. But 49er Jeff says he believes it'll be Mitchell who runs away with it. This gave me an idea, Randon. All right, so we are attempting to make it to the Atlanta Falcons game, right? That is on the calendar that you and I are going to attempt to be there at that game. So here's my proposal, that we throw out there a little friendly gentleman's wager here of who will be the leading rusher going into the Falcons game. Who will have the most rushing yards going into the Falcons game? I will give you the choice of who you want to take first. I will take one of the other remaining options and keep it friendly. A hot dog is on the line, and those are very reasonably priced in Atlanta, right? Because Arthur Blank has done a good job of keeping the cost down on concessions. So it's a wager. We get to talk some trash about it, but it's not financially burdensome.
I like it. All right, putting me on the spot here. Betting odds would be Mitchell.
You would think so.
I think Trey Lance is an outside shot of having the rushing leader.
That's a good get if you go that direction, because that forces me to then pick one of the backs, and I might get it wrong of which back is getting the most carries at that point, so you may end up winning with Lance anyway.
I'm going to go T. Lance with
most rushing yards. He's taking Trey Lance, ladies and gentlemen. I respect the big swing. I mean, you just took a big cut at that fastball right there. It remains to be seen whether you knocked it out of the park or fouled it off into the bleachers. I got to go scratch then. I got to take Elijah Mitchell on that one. So you got Trey Lance. I got Elijah Mitchell. It doesn't feel very fair at that one, but all that's on the line is that almighty hot dog that maybe puts in there.
That sounds good. I mean, if I would have took Mitchell, who would you have taken?
If Trey's the rushing leader, Shanahan needs to be fired because he's not using him wisely. I'm
not talking about design runs, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could come from any type of runs.
Yeah, I think you're looking at the fact that for me, it's like he's still a rookie. The offensive line, which we're getting there, isn't very great, which we'll get to the rankings here in a little bit. I mean, he could be running for his life, and those scrambles add up. I mean, let's see. How many rushing yards did he have last year? What was his average? I have this pulled up here. I mean, I guess 28 yards per game, not even close to the 87. So that would be. I think I overthought that one, like Randall said.
Randall Riley yelling at you. Overthought that one. I'm telling you,
it's right in front of you.
It is going to be. I mean, easy money. Easy money. Hopefully, Elijah comes through for me on that one. All right. So this next one is slander, in my opinion, and it got me even more riled up than the Deebo Samuel slander. And this is the running back group rankings that PFF came out with. The 49ers are in tier 3, Randon, and that's qualifying as getting the job done. They are 27th in a league of 32 teams. The Niners are 27th. Here's what they had to say about it. Similar to teams using a rushing threat at quarterback or an elite offensive line, it's difficult to separate rushing production in Kyle Shanahan's scheme from the rushing talent. A number of unheralded backs have put up strong numbers under Shanahan, which includes 6th-round rookie Elijah Mitchell in 2021. Mitchell has plenty of speed, 4.38 second 40-yard dash, which plays in a 49ers rushing attack that hunts for big plays on the perimeter. Mitchell will be backed up by Jeff Wilson, Trey Sermon, and 2022 draft selection Tyrion Davis-Price, a 3rd-round pick who ranked 172nd on PFF's big board. This is crazy to me because the room returns basically intact, having invested a 3rd-round pick in Tyrion Davis-Price. And this group finished 7th in total rushing yards last season. And of those 6 teams that finished in front of them, 3 of those 6 had dual threat quarterbacks, the Bills, the Ravens, and the Eagles. So it feels like complete slander to me to say that this running back room cannot have success. I understand that they're saying Kyle Shanahan schemes it up, but it feels insulting to say that it's not the running backs themselves who earned that 7th rated ranking at the end of last season with their output.
So, by the way, I looked it up for the 2 starts that Trey Lance had, averaged over 80 yards per game. So I think I might be in this more than you think, big guy. But yeah, I think the 26 is slander. I mean, you can't be a top 10 rushing team and have a decent room. Now, there isn't like this big bell cow, or there isn't like this big, like, outstanding talent, but you could argue that if Elijah Mitchell was healthy last season for more games than just 10, he would have had over 1,000 yards and he would have had a better diagnosis. But like I said, no big home run ability. Like, I mean, for the 4-3, he doesn't really break off very many big runs. Like I said, 39 was his largest of the season. And you look at the other running backs as well. I mean, that was the biggest one was by Deebo Samuel. And now, he's used as a running back. So does that wide back like factor into that statement? It doesn't look like it does. I think the fact that it's in the bottom 10 in the league is kind of slander. And I think going into next season, like you said, with the emergence of a dual threat quarterback, you could see us potentially being a top 2, top 3 rushing team in the NFL.
Right. And I get what PFF is saying here, right? They're saying, well, Deebo Samuel was, one of your best running backs last year, and he was a wide receiver. 187 came in to point that out. And I understand that they're saying, we feel you reached on the running back that you took in the 3rd round. We believe that Kyle Shanahan's scheme is what creates those running lanes for those running backs. And we just don't know a whole heck of a lot about the rest of the room. Again, Lee Ving coming in with that phenomenal comment. So I understand the reasoning that they have. But again, going back to a team without a rushing quarterback, aside from Trey Lance in those 2 games, and you're hoping he carries forward that average next year. But aside from that, you're looking at Jimmy Garoppolo, who absolutely is not a dual threat quarterback, and they were 7th in total rushing yards last season. So it does feel like slander not to have them at a bare minimum in the top half of the league as far as talent in the running back room.
Yeah, Terradome brings up a good point. Our passing game is going to open up the run game. You saw that in the Rams NFC Championship. They were putting 8 people in the box. And so I think they're going to get more room to run here. It'll be interesting to see. I wonder how much, we talked about this multiple times, that how much the Niners will switch it to power over the outside zone. Well, Shanahan seems to be drafting more inside zone and power backs, but is he going to go away from what made him an effective play caller to begin with? I don't know. It's going to be kind of something there, but I think it's slander bottom that part in the league. I mean, you're looking at Elijah Mitchell was on a per game basis one of the top backs in the league, even as a rookie. You got to assume positive progression going into the 2nd season, and then you got to hope that one of the 2-3 round running backs hits to where you have a good 2-headed monster there, and then obviously the running attack of a quarterback. We saw, like you said, multiple teams in the top 5 had dual threat quarterbacks because it just opens up so much of the field. I think that this is going to be, they're going to look back at this list and wish they bumped that number up quite a bit.
I agree. And it's so much slander that I'm bringing in Darren's comment full bore. That PFF grade is bullshit. Bullshit, man. Getting
him to swear lies.
Telling you. It's upsetting. It's upsetting. All right, let's move on to another ranking where we're rated as elite, so you can't really get too upset about that. Let's talk about the defensive line rankings. Now, I think you can take a little bit of issue on where we fall in the elite tier, because again, we're at the end of the elite tier. This is the rankings for defensive lines in the NFL. Niners coming in at 6th in that elite ranking. So the Rams take the first spot. I can't really fault that. The Commanders, then the Packers, then the Steelers, then the Bucks, then the Niners. They absolutely do acknowledge a very deep edge group, which I appreciate. And then they call out defensive tackle being the weakness in their view. They specifically reference Eric Armstead being a better pass rusher than a run defender. And they've called out that there are doubts about Javon Kinlaw. I can't fault the reasoning that they have for putting the San Francisco 49ers at 6th. Again, I would probably debate it and move them up a couple of slots, move some of those other teams down, still within the elite rankings. But they did call the Niners elite, and they did specifically call out the strengths and the weaknesses as I see them as well. So I can't get too upset about this one.
I agree with their reasoning. I don't know why the Rams are first. It's like, is Aaron Donald playing all 4 positions simultaneously? where's the other production coming from? You know, like
they do. They're like, Aaron Donald, check, number 1.
Yeah, because he plays all 4 positions at one time.
Yes,
I think that you're looking at it here, and like we were top 5 in sacks. You know, you have the Commanders last season decimated with injuries.
Right.
So if they come back, you know, they had emergence of other players. And so I think they could be up there. Packers, I'm not too sure about them. They lost a big blitzer there, but Rashawn Gary did improve. And
yeah,
so
it feels like the Bucks and the Packers have that interior lockdown. Rashawn Gary for the Packers is elite, no question.
Yeah, so you're looking at Tampa Bay, Akeem Hicks, he was a top defensive tackle from. I believe the Bears coming over in addition with Vita Vea, and they have Barrett and everything like that. Like I said, they ranks top 10 in interior defensive lineman pressure rate, and then you're adding Akeem Hicks to that from a Bears team who was top 5 in sacks last year. So I think that you see some reasons to debate the other guys. I think that the ranking for the Rams being elite because they have Aaron Donald should push the Steelers and the Niners up because they have 2 of the most elite defensive ends.
They do.
And they're taking on double teams as well. So I just wonder why that elite status wasn't brought up. I mean, obviously Darnold, multiple defensive player of the year. So his elite may be in a different stratosphere than a couple other people, but the depth of the San Francisco line has to come into play a little bit more, in my opinion. And I think we should be, right around the top 3 or so.
It does feel like the Commanders have been evaluated on paper because they are coming back from being decimated by injury. But I did view them as being an elite defense last year and was surprised by the way in which they underproduced, mainly caused by injury. So I would expect a bounce back, but it seems like a stretch to assume that they're going to jump up to that number 2 spot. And then have to agree on both your stance on the Rams and USMC Niners for life coming in to say that the Rams did lose some depth along that line. And so, yeah, you have Aaron Donald in there, but without having Von Miller on the other side, it just doesn't feel like the number 1 freaking line. If I'm reevaluating, I'm probably throwing Tampa Bay up at number 1. I'm fine with the Rams and the Steelers being in the top 4. I would throw the Niners into the top 4 and have a heady debate on where they belong at 2, 3, or 4. And then I'm putting the Packers and the Commanders behind the Niners in that 5 and 6 spot.
Yeah, you see the Steelers, like you mentioned in a couple shows ago, top in the league in sacks multiple years. So, they have a good group there. One of the best.
TJ Watt is getting his. And
so, but I think the Niners, you could see it as far as, the pass rush grade for the defensive tackles is going to be the weak point. They have a corral of defensive ends. Is a lot of it's going to be based on hypotheticals. Can Kinlaw make that jump? Can Armstead continue the production if he's consistently inside? Are there the loss of DJ Jones? Like, is that going to be felt more than what we thought? So I think that although we got more depth on the edge, the interior is a little different. And we're going to see if they're going to be able to hold up all season long.
So it looks like Randall Riley has given us that transition that we crave. He says, we know our O-line won't be close to any of the top O-line list. Well, let's find out where PFF had the 49ers ranked along that offensive line ranking.
You had to scroll quite a bit.
You did have to scroll down, not tier 1, not tier 2, but tier 3. That is signified as high-end potential. They ranked the 49ers as 14th. Can't get much more middle of the pack than that. They did seem to nail the starting lineup as I would put it right now. Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel at center, Daniel Brunskill at right guard, and Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. The interesting piece for me is in subbing out Alex Mack for Jake Brendel, and obviously bringing in instead of Mike McGlinchey, you've got Tom Compton there at right tackle, and then Laken Tomlinson at left guard for Aaron Banks. They ranked the 49ers at the end of the 2021 season as the 3rd best offensive line unit in the league. Trent Williams had the highest ever offensive line grade. And so, yeah, I get that there's significant turnover there, but it feels like a big drop off. So this to me seems like a situation where it's like, hey, the 49ers have a lot of turnover with some players that we don't really have a whole lot of tape on. Like, where do they belong? Somewhere in the middle of the pack seems about right. It just, there's not enough information for me to definitively say they really flubbed this one. And there's not enough information for me to say, yeah, they really nailed it with where the 49ers are. This is a big question mark for me. I wouldn't be surprised by any outcome. I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners ranked 3rd again at the end of this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they were middle of the pack. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were more towards the end of the pack.
I agree with you there. You're looking at Trent Williams, is the best tackle in football. So he's carrying this team. And I think you look at the second best offensive lineman on this group is coming back from a quad injury.
Yes.
And Mike McGlinchey. So, and then all the 3 guys in the middle are unknowns. Like, it's like, what are you going to do? Like, you can't really put him in the top 10. You have Laken Tomlinson, who left, who never missed the game. And you have Banks, who's a 2nd round pick, who played the least amount of snaps out of anybody who, any position player outside of a quarterback in the 2nd round. Like, there's a lot of unknowns. Jake Brendel, a journeyman, but he's a journeyman, but why hasn't he started on any rosters before? That's why, because he's not that great. So, we're hoping for the sum is greater than the individual parts on this one, and I don't fault them for being middle of the pack. I think Trent Williams is really carrying this ranking here.
I agree, but Randall Riley brings in an excellent point here when we're talking about Aaron Donald and how he weighted the defensive line. He says, how is that possible when we have Trent Williams, a.k.a. Aaron Donald, of the offensive line? That should propel us towards the top of the list based on the Rams being number 1 in that defensive ranking. I can't take a whole lot of slander from this one. I like to get upset at PFF. I like to be irritated and voice my opinions on that. But quite honestly, this to me is just an acknowledgement of this being an unknown, and that it is a bit all over the place, as Leaving comes in to say. That this one's hard to predict. It's hard to say how the 49ers will actually turn out in the offensive line. This last topic does not feel like it's hard to predict. This feels like there's enough information out there for us to make the call, and it is the top play callers. This was the start of what got everyone in a kerfluffle, right? They put out the picture of the top 4 play callers, Andy Reid being number 1, Kellen Moore being number 2, Byron Leftwich being number 3, Kyle Shanahan being 4. They did not link it originally to the story. It was just the graphic that had Kyle Shanahan behind Kellen Moore and Byron Leftwich. And 49ers fans were, as you might imagine, incensed by that. Now that you've had a chance to look at this list and read the article that gives you a little bit of the backstory behind it, how do you feel about Kyle Shanahan being 4th on the list?
After reading the article, it makes sense. So, they value a lot of what is the highest potential of getting yards, right? And so, if you look at teams like the Niners who run a lot, the expected yards per play are way less on run plays than they are pass plays, and so that's already skewing him at a disadvantage there.
Right.
And then 2, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, which is whack, because that's basically failing to acknowledge that there's creativity in the run game.
I think it's just it's obvious. It's like, okay, well, yeah, of course, run plays usually get less than pass plays. We get that, but it doesn't make you
half.
it doesn't make you a worse play caller.
No.
I think if you look at this list, he's the only one. Shanahan is the only one without a top 10 quarterback, or maybe a potential future Hall of Fame quarterback. Right. You can debate Matt Stafford as a Hall of Famer all you want, but he just won a Super Bowl and he had a hell of a year. Like, Shanahan's definitely got the worst quarterback of anybody in the top 6. And so, like, would he be number 1 or number 2 with a adequate quarterback play for all of the season? Like, I mean, it makes sense there. You look at Andy Reid, obviously the Chiefs offense is dynamic. And when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the game throwing the ball over the field, like, that's definitely going to help you. You look at Dallas for most of the season was one of the top offenses.
Right.
Does this list doesn't put in account that they played in one of the most BS divisions in football, and they scored on average 40 points against their own division, but they also had a great receiver room. Amari Cooper, I think, is a very underrated receiver. CeeDee Lamb, you had Cedric Wilson got poached from there. You have a two-headed running back room, especially with Tony Pollard catching balls out of the backfield, who took a lot of those to the house. And I think Dalton Schultz is one of the top 5 tight ends in the league. Like, they have so much firepower. Like, the EPA per play and all these metrics that they use for these rankings are going to be a lot higher. Is that Kellen Moore, or is that the players executing his plays to perfection?
Right.
I think you look at both could be said, right? You have to design the right play, and then the play has to be executed.
Yes. And certainly you're going to say in Tampa Bay, like, can you eliminate the Tom Brady effect from the statistics? And I would argue that no, you probably can't. You have to just acknowledge that you have one of the most special quarterbacks in the league, even at his age, operating that offense, right? So I agree. When I looked at Andy Reid, what jumped out to me is much the same what you're talking about with Kyle Shanahan, is that he was able to make his system work well with an averaged arm quarterback like Alex Smith. And I still view Alex Smith as an above average quarterback. I view Jimmy Garoppolo as an above average quarterback. However, I would view both of them as having average or slightly below average NFL arms when it comes to being a quarterback. So that speaks to the system in my mind, when you can plug in someone that isn't an elite talent and still have the amazing win results, right? Andy Reid was able to do that with Alex Smith. Certainly Kyle Shanahan has been doing that with Jimmy Garoppolo and a medley of other quarterbacks, right? And Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard didn't quite get the wins on those quarterbacks. So maybe that's a counter argument to what I'm saying here. But what I wonder is, you plug in Trey Lance, is he going to have the same effect that Patrick Mahomes did in Kansas City, taking the offense to an elite level? Like, will this be the season where adding that next level quarterback proves the dominance that most of us who watch the 49ers on a regular basis already see?
I think that depends on Shanahan. And my biggest knock on Shanahan is it's always been his scheme over anything else. And I mean, obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo and Kirk Cousins and all these guys, Matt Ryan, are, hey, like, just put the scheme in front of me and I'll execute whatever you need to execute. Will he be able to take a back seat like Andy Reid did to when Patrick Mahomes got there and realize Patrick Mahomes is going to do Patrick Mahomes things? Sometimes he's going to run around and make a dumb play like in the AFC Championship game, and sometimes he's going to throw a 60-yard bomb and make you look good. But I think Shanahan's going to have to realize that there's going to be some plays where you're going to have to rely on the athleticism of Trey Lance and have to be okay with it.
I agree. So when I look at this list and read the information that they took to create this list, I don't have a huge issue with it. What I do have an issue with is the labeling of it, right? If they had just called it something else, it would have acknowledged what they were taking into account. Because with the Dallas Cowboys in particular, I think it's hard not to take into account the skill position value that you have there on that team. I mean, the wide receiver room, Ezekiel Elliott as your running back, Dak Prescott as your quarterback, that offense had all of the pieces necessary. And if you're not taking that into account, then are you really evaluating the top play caller, or are you really evaluating the top offense? So it could just be the title of it that gets me, because when I think of play callers, I'm putting Kyle Shanahan right up there with Andy Reid, and it's a jump down to the next list of candidates for me.
I mean, I could see McVay up there too, and all this kind of stuff like that. I think Kellen Moore and Leftwich won. just because there's like they only had 1 year in the league. It's not a consistent thing. I think that's where a lot of people maybe gripe, but it's based off of last season's numbers, and Dallas had an effective offense. But like I said, I think you look at the team there. I mean, the Niners had, if you look at the list, one of the lower end running backs of the top 6. They had definitely the worst quarterback of the top 6. And so like, I think you're looking at a team there that could take a jump. And he said it. And if you watch like all the, like him, like going in the comments and getting berated for this list, like he was backing up. He says, like Lance could change things for them. Like they could execute the offense, or Lance could make the offense worse. Like we don't really know. Like Lance is going to have to hit the stuff that Shanahan schemes up, because he's going to have to hit the first read that's open for 7 yards sometimes, and then sometimes he's going to have to throw the ball downfield, and so he's going to have to do all those things. And I think that they're synonymous with each other. Like, okay, like the debates of was Brady better or was Belichick better? No, they're on the same team. Like they both did great things.
They complemented one another.
Exactly. So like Shanahan is going to go. It can out scheme a lot of people, like you said. Like when we had multiple injuries on the offensive line in 2019, scheming around players being injured and stuff like that with a team that was just blossoming. Like you look at a lot of those things, it's quite ingenious the way he folds stuff into multiple weeks just to put it on tape and then expose the defense in week 5 with something they've never seen. I think that stuff is high level play design, but play design has to be executed, and it wasn't executed as a super high level last season, and that's why you see him a little bit down on the list. But if Trey Lance executes at a higher level, there's more EPA per play as far as plays downfield, and you still see the Yak Bros go at it if Trey Lance can hit those guys in stride. He could be number 1 on this list next at the start of the 2023 season.
I do agree with one of the comments that came in earlier that until he wins that title, you could see the disrespect continuing, even though that obviously doesn't apply to Kellen Moore on this list. But you could see him climbing and being widely recognized as the genius that he is once he has, in fact, secured one of those Lombardi trophies. Well, I will say this about PFF. People love to bash him, and I'm here for that. Like, you want to bash PFF? Go for it. And I do appreciate the fact that they throw this stuff out there and they have legitimate source material behind it. You don't have to agree with it, but it puts an argument out there in the forefront and then allows us to shout at it. And that's what we love to do when talking about football. So I appreciate PFF for what it is, a conversation starter in my book.
It's great. And it's stuff to use and talk about. And I think we get so focused in on the Niners and don't really watch a lot of the other teams. And then you get like butthurt when your team isn't ranked to where it's supposed to be.
Right.
But realistically, I mean, I don't watch all 30 plus teams every single game, all the plays, and these guys do. And so some of the lists are phony. Like I don't agree with the running back one in particular. But at least it's conversation and they put information back on it and it gets dialogue going. And especially in a dead period where there's no football, dialogue is much needed.
And they take the heat as well, as you're talking about the guy going through the comments and getting berated while doing it. So I think it's fun, and Lee Ving agrees. PFF fantasy writers and projections are actually great. We'll have to get into that a little bit going into fantasy football this season, but that takes us to the end of this content. However, down below in the description are the links to Randon and Hockey Royalty, a new addition in this one. So even if you are subscribed to my man Randon, even if you've already gone in and followed him on Twitter, subscribe to Cerberus Sports on YouTube, those links are still down below. Now added to it is Hockey Royalty, because my man is running that over there and doing good things. So the Hockey Royalty Twitter handle is down below, and the Hockey Royalty podcast and YouTube channel are all there. So if you enjoy Randon on this program, go over and show him some love on those programs as well.
I appreciate that. For people who don't have a hockey team and want to get a hockey team, LA Kings are always accepting new fans. Highest percentage of season ticket holders of the Latina variety.
Nice.
So if you're a Spanish speaker and want to watch some hockey, LA Kings are your team. We just had Chris Peters on from Daily Faceoff, formerly of ESPN, to talk about the draft. Corey Pronman, Scott Wheeler. And so even if you're Sharks fans out there, and I feel bad for you that you are, you guys are still in the draft. So go and look at draft content and see some of the guys that are going to be there in the first round.
And there's a question from the audience. Andrew coming in. Is Randon from Wisconsin? I believe that's in reference to the new hat that we were talking about pre-show. Give him a little backdrop.
So yeah, I try to go to a new baseball stadium every single summer. I've got 25 knocked down, and I take a cap from every single stadium. So I thought about, instead of me just wearing the LA Kings stuff all the time or whatever, I just try on a little different cap for you guys, change it up a little bit. Plus, I like the old school one with the mitt and the ball. It's very classic.
I think it's a great fit, my friend. And I appreciate Lee Ving coming in. Good show. You two are a great combo. I couldn't agree more, Lee Ving. I always enjoy my time talking to Randon McMahon. And I know that we always bring the good content. People seem to eat it up. People seem to really enjoy this little pairing. Randon, as always, thank you so much for being a part of the program today.
Yeah, Netflix would definitely pick us up for a season 2. We're that good. So
yes, season 2 of Between Two Beards coming
yes.
soon.
I mean, God, can't wait for football to start. Always a pleasure talking to you, and it's nice to take this donation and get Rob a beer with that hot dog.
Randall Riley coming in for Randon. Randon, take this donation and get Rob a beer with that hot dog. I think he's predicting that you've lost this bet already. I think that's the bold prediction with this super chat. I appreciate it.
If I do win, I'm just pocketing that 20 and I'm going to get a hot dog and a beer from Rob. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right on, Randall. Appreciate you coming in. Appreciate the show. Great content in the middle of the dead period. Thanks to PFF for putting out those lists so that we could debate them hotly and get angry about the slander. Randon, do you have upcoming shows on Hockey Royalty?
Yeah, well, like I said, we just dropped today the Chris Peters one for the draft. So all you Sharks fans, there's plenty of draft content in there. Like I said, we have Corey Pronman and Scott Wheeler. Coming up tomorrow, we have people from Locked On Coyotes talking about a potential trade with Jacob Chikrin. So there's a lot of offseason stuff going on. And then I'm about to hop off and watch a little bit of the Stanley Cup Finals right now. So.
Boom. Let's all get and watch some Stanley Cups Finals right now. Fantastic show. Thrilled to be here. I will be back on tomorrow with the Sneakerhead call-in program, video call-in show at 5 p.m. tomorrow. I will be back. Until then, as always, cheers, faithful.